Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your 2-11 Giants have a game this Sunday, though I'm sure a lot of you probably don't want to be reminded of that. 2-11 Giants hosting the 8-5 Baltimore Ravens, and yes, I did just remind you, and yes, we are going to continue doing these crossover podcasts. And here to help me, break down Giants Ravens, teach us a little bit about the Ravens, is Kevin Oestreicher of Locked on Ravens podcast and of the Ravens Wire website as well. Kevin, thank you so much for hopping on for a couple minutes.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me. I know that maybe Giants fans don't want to hear about an upcoming game and kind of want to just fast forward to March, April, May when a lot of the new parts of the team could be coming in. But on the Baltimore side of things, this actually is a decently important game just because the Ravens have struggled over two of the last 3 weeks. They've lost two of their last three games. And, as much as Giants fans might not want to hear it, a lot of people in Baltimore are looking at this as maybe a get back game and a game that could give them a lot of momentum moving forward.
Sure, I was going to say we could pretty much wrap this show up by saying Giants stink, Ravens are good, and calling it a day. But we do want to entertain a little bit and get into it a little deeper. And it's interesting because the Giants are 2-11, and the Ravens are headed for their, I think it's sixth playoff appearance in 7 years. And Giants fans don't want to hear it, but the Ravens are 8-5, and you can make an argument, I think, that the Ravens have been a disappointment this year. I mean, the Giants fans would take an 8-5 disappointment any day of the week at this point, but do you agree that you can make an argument that the Ravens to this point have been a disappointment?
I think certain aspects, most definitely. I think as a whole, there have been disappointing aspects and great aspects of this team, but I think you look at what happened with the Ravens last season. They were the best regular season team in the league and were blowing out teams left and right. And that really felt like the year in Baltimore. It felt like the roster was there, felt like the coaching staff was there. And obviously there was disappointment in the AFC championship game. But this year, like every year, obviously, it's different. The defense pass wise struggled immensely early in the year. That has gotten shored up. The offense is played at a historic pace in a lot of different categories, but they have had their inconsistencies. I think some of the most disappointing parts of it have just been how many times the Ravens haven't been able to get out of their own way, particularly when playing teams that they should have beaten, like the Las Vegas Raiders have 2 wins this season. They're a terrible team. One of those wins was against the Ravens. Gardner Minshew apparently just loves beating the Ravens. Did it last year with the Colts and did it this year with the Raiders. The Ravens are, I believe, still the most penalized team in the league. I know the Giants have had some issues with penalties over the last couple of weeks. The Ravens have had issues the whole season. I think they average 8.5 penalties per game. Then you have opportunities where for the Ravens, you look at a guy like Justin Tucker, and he's had opportunities this season, and this has been by far the most disappointing season of his career, almost like watching a hero fall here in Baltimore, considering how much he's meant to this franchise. And City has just above a 70% field goal conversion percentage and has actively lost the Ravens a couple of games this season and passed, in fact, 2 of the last 3 weeks. It's been the Ravens lose by 2. Justin Tucker leaves 6 points on the board. Ravens lose by 5. Justin Tucker leaves 7 points on the board. So it's been tough there. I think 8-5, your record is what it says you are. You're an 8-5 football team. But I think these last 4 weeks will tell us a lot about just who this Ravens team is heading into the playoffs, because you can essentially split the year up into 3 seasons. You got before the bye week, you got after the bye week, and you got the playoffs. And so obviously the most important season is the playoffs, but for now, Baltimore has to focus on this last 4-game stretch.
You touched on Justin Tucker, and that's one of the things I want to get into. But before we do that, I do have a couple of other things that I want to ask you about. And we talked about disappointment and all of that. But what I read and what I see is some people are saying, well, they're 8-5 and they've lost some games they shouldn't lose. But are the Ravens still a Super Bowl contender? Are they still a team that should be in that conversation? And so I'm curious what your take is on that. Is this a team that you still look at as this is a team that has a legitimate shot, to be playing for a title?
I do. And there are multiple reasons for that. I think even when you just talk about how open not only the AFC is, but the NFL looks right now, where I don't know if there's a clear, I guess people would probably go Detroit or maybe Buffalo at this point in the season in terms of who's this Super Bowl favorite. But Kansas City, to a lot of people, they keep racking off wins, but they come in all these crazy ways. And it's been sustainable so far through 3 months, but is it sustainable come playoff time? A team like Pittsburgh, who Baltimore's battling for the AFC North crown right now. Pittsburgh has a 3-game lead on Baltimore, 2 in the loss column, 1 with the tiebreaker. If Philly beats Pittsburgh and Baltimore beats the Giants, that's 1 game off of that, and then Pittsburgh and Baltimore match up. If Baltimore wins that game, all of a sudden you're tied for the division. And so I think that when you look at what Baltimore has done, the talent on the roster, they just haven't put it all together. And honestly, a lot of these teams haven't put it all together yet. But I feel like if Baltimore could, if they can get rid of some of those self inflicted mistakes, they absolutely have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Now, if they keep playing the way they have been with the inconsistencies, with the mistakes, they'll probably be a second round out, depending on who they get in the playoffs and what their matchup path looks like. Because I think that plays a factor as well. I feel like if Baltimore doesn't win the AFC North and gets the 5 seed, I feel like they would run through Houston, who's looking at the 4 seed right now, pretty just locked in there. So Baltimore's for sure is a Super Bowl contender. I think as long as you have Lamar Jackson, you have a chance, but you have to play your best football in the playoffs because, like we saw last season with the Ravens being on the wrong side of this, it's not who's the best regular season team, it's who's the best team in the playoffs. And Baltimore has a shot to do that if they can turn some stuff around.
Before I ask you a couple of Lamar Jackson questions, I just wanted to throw this out and see what you think of it. You mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, the Chiefs just keep winning games and they keep winning games in all sorts of crazy ways, all sorts of close games. And I've just had this nagging feeling all year long with the Kansas City Chiefs that they're going to win all of these regular season games in all of these inexplicable ways. And that somewhere along the way in the playoffs, that's going to blow up in their faces and they're going to lose a game they have no business losing.
Yeah. And to me, I think the big part of it with Kansas City is, it's like you win on a doink field goal. You win because a penalty happens. You win 5 seconds and you score a touchdown because the opposing defense can't stop you. It just feels like that's it every single week. And look, good teams find ways to win those types of games instead of lose them. But I think the most concerning part, if you're someone who is on the Chiefs or a Chiefs fan, is that it feels like that's the only way they can win. It's like
You
they
keep
can't pull.
needing those things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can't pull away from a team like the Panthers. You have
Right.
to beat them in a crazy fashion. You can't beat a team
Mhm.
that you're favored heavily in. You have to find a crazy way to win that. And again, each game is individually different, but it just feels like we see the same thing over and over again with the Chiefs. And Buffalo was able to defeat them, and they kind of got a taste of their own medicine for their only loss of the year. But feels like they're well on their way to the 1 seed, unless a couple of games here down the stretch they lose, and Buffalo can capitalize on that. But it just feels like we should be talking about a team that has 5, 6 losses, and here they are with one. And I feel like if you're a team like Baltimore, if you're a team like Buffalo, even one of those wild card teams outside of Baltimore, like a Los Angeles, who just lost to Kansas City, but still could
Mhm.
be a factor. I think you're looking at that matchup and feeling a lot more confident than maybe you have in recent seasons against the Chiefs because even the defense hasn't been up to snuff this season. Where last year it was the defense carried the offense and the offense turned it on in the playoffs. The defense hasn't been great. The offense hasn't been great. It's just been that clutch gene is unlike any other. So I'd be a little nervous if I was Kansas City.
Speaking of clutch gene, you mentioned earlier that anytime you have Lamar Jackson, you feel like you have a chance. How do you explain regular season Lamar versus playoff Lamar? Because there has been a significant difference throughout his career.
There has, and I don't think anybody himself even, but I don't think anybody is going to shy away from the fact that for the most part, Lamar Jackson has not been able to get it done in the playoffs when it matters. He's had a couple of good games, Tennessee, and then Texans last year was an awesome game for him. But the Chiefs game, that was a lot of things. Lamar certainly played a part. Coaching played a part. 2019 against the Titans, that was bad. Although he did have 500 total yards in that game. It just feels like it's the same story for both the coaching staff and for Lamar, where they get out of rhythm. And when they get out of rhythm, especially in those high leverage situations, they don't really know what to do. And that to me is more of a coaching staff thing than it is a Lamar thing. But in that Kansas City game, like forcing a ball in a triple coverage to Isaiah Likely that resulted in an interception, or, not having enough consistency to keep up with Kansas City early. The defense kind of has to carry you a little bit in that second half, and you still can't get the job done. It just feels like it's the same story, or at least a similar story. So Lamar's had some playoff success, but when you look at the record, you look at the big moments, especially when you're a one seed, those expectations they skyrocket. This isn't like
Hmm.
you're an underdog 7 seed and you're fighting every week and this that. The expectation when you're the one seed and you've had as dominant of a regular season as you did in 2019 or 2023 is all right. Well, this is your year to win the Super Bowl. And both those years they've fallen short. So last year was Lamar's first time in the AFC Championship game. I'm sure there were some nerves that went into it. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, that bunch has been there, done that. That's easy money for those guys. But I would say that depending on what happens this year, those conversations will become a lot louder because obviously for John Harbaugh, and that kind of gets into a different conversation about what his future could look like with the team. If this is a wild card exit, second round exit for the Ravens again, what do you look at there? But then you do look at some of these other quarterbacks who have had, I guess, late blooming playoff success. Peyton Manning's the guy who gets most compared to Lamar Jackson in that way, where Peyton didn't win until his late 20s. Drew Brees didn't win for a little bit. Some of these guys, I think we've become so used to the model of you have to win on your rookie contract, or else it becomes a lot more difficult. Sure, that's a realistic conversation. But I think for Lamar and the Ravens in general, just it's not getting out of your game plan and using what got you there to your advantage. It feels like far too often the team just loses who they are.
So the more short term question, for the Giants, the thing the Giants fans would be concerned about, and that the Giants are concerned about, is Sunday. And how scared should the Giants be after Lamar Jackson said he got cussed out by his mother?
I think when you're looking at whether you want to call it revenge Lamar Jackson or point to prove Lamar Jackson, I think Giants fans should be decently afraid of it because after that Philly loss, that was one of the more passionate, animated post-game press conferences we've seen out of Lamar, and he was very clear that he was ready. If you had told Lamar that the Ravens were getting on a bus and going up to the Meadowlands to play the Giants 2 hours from then, he would have said, "I'm ready. Let's go. I want to play another full game right now." That's how amped up he was. And on Wednesday, he had said, "Hey, I'm still antsy. I'm hyped up. Nothing's changed." So I would expect to see Lamar Jackson run a little bit more. Now, that doesn't mean Lamar's going to get 25 design runs and they're changing their offense. He's obviously going to use his arm and use his legs to his advantage. But when there's green grass in front of him, usually we've seen over the course of his career, Lamar, one read, two read, boom, he's off. Three read, boom, he's off. But this year, he's let routes develop a little bit more, let his guys try to get open and get the ball to them. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a wrong decision. But it's just a matter of over the course of the game, what's the right decision between taking the green grass and letting the routes develop. I think Lamar has leaned towards letting the routes develop a little bit more. I think at times it's definitely cost him yards. So it's a matter of just taking what the defense gives you. And if Lamar is not doing that with his legs, I feel like Lamar has been vilified for that aspect of his game, where in reality, it doesn't matter how you throw the ball, it doesn't matter how you run the ball. All the yards count the same. 6 yards
Yards
is
are
six
yards.
yards. Yeah, whether
Hmm.
you throw for it or run for it. So
Hmm.
I feel like over the course of these next 4 weeks, again, it's not going to be such a drastic change where Lamar all of a sudden is attempting like 15 passes a game and he's running 20 times a game. Of course, that's not what's going to happen. That's not what anybody here in Baltimore wants to happen. But I just think it's about, again, taking what the defense gives you and making sure you can punish the defense both with your arm and your legs, which he's great at using both.
Absolutely. And a little bit of that is just maturation of a quarterback, I think. Just playing the position the way that it's meant to be played. But it is interesting, and it is a little bit, from the Giants' perspective. I don't want to see an angry Lamar. I really don't. It's going to be bad enough.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of the quarterback situation, I have to ask you: the backup quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens is Josh Johnson. And what is Josh Johnson now? Is he about 55?
May
Is he
Might be. He's getting up there.
he's played for at least half the league now, I think.
Yeah.
And and I can't believe that the Ravens, trying to win a Super Bowl, trying to go as far as they're trying to go. I can't believe that they're sitting there with Josh Johnson as their backup quarterback. And that leads me to a Daniel Jones question. And when the Giants waived Daniel Jones and that whole thing, and the way the season's gone for the Giants, it was inevitable that Jones was going to head to the bench, and him asking for his releases. I don't blame him for that at all. But I immediately thought that the Ravens would be a terrific landing spot for him because, listen, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he is a massive upgrade from Josh Johnson. And Daniel Jones' play style in using his legs, and being part of the run game, his play style is similar in that way, in that you can run the same offense that you're running. I mean, obviously, he's not going to make the explosive plays that Lamar makes with his legs, but he can get you yards. I'm just curious if you thought the Ravens would be a good landing spot, for Daniel Jones, and if you know whether the Ravens, made a serious run at bringing him to Baltimore.
Yeah, all the reports indicated that the Ravens were one of the teams that were interested in him alongside, I think, Minnesota, San Francisco. There were a couple other teams that were in that conversation. But I agree with you where I thought that it was the right move to make for the Ravens because Daniel Jones can run the style of offense Baltimore runs. Now, obviously, he can't run it to the level, nearly the level Lamar Jackson can. But, if you try to throw Josh Johnson in there, I mean, Josh Johnson does not have a lot of athleticism anymore. I mean, he's not the type of guy that can do a lot. And I feel, look, they like the veteran ability of Josh Johnson, but if Lamar Jackson goes down, your season is essentially sunk. And while a guy like Daniel Jones, sure, I mean, he could. The way that I looked at it is if Lamar had to miss time during the regular season, say he had to miss a month and you have 7 weeks left, Daniel Jones, he gives you a much better shot of keeping your postseason chances alive, keeping your division chances alive. It gives you a better chance to win than a Josh Johnson. So I know that the popular narrative is yes, if Lamar goes down the season, I mean, you're not going to win a Super Bowl if Lamar's out for the year. Sure. I mean, the defense isn't as good as last year. You could make an argument last year that, oh, the defense could have carried them and you could have had maybe like a Trent Dilfer at quarterback like in 2000 and it would have worked. But this year it's just not the same. But backup quarterback is something the Ravens have been trying to figure out behind Lamar. Tyler Huntley was their guy for a while. He was fine, but he was really a low ceiling, low floor player. And those games were always like 13 to 10, 16 to 13. That wasn't really good. But for Daniel Jones, I think that he could have been a really solid option for them. And apparently they were in on him, but I guess he just thought Minnesota was the better opportunity. And that's where he ended up.
So let me circle back to Justin Tucker. You talked about him a little bit at the top of the show. And be honest with me, did you ever think that we would be here, that you would be here, and when Justin Tucker walks out on the field, that you would wonder what was about to happen, that you wouldn't feel good about it? Did you ever think you'd be there with Tucker?
I guess if we're talking about Justin Tucker in his 40s and he's really trying to extend that career and he gets to a point, there's always going to be decline. Everybody goes through, even the greats. But to see it happen now and to see it happen as sharply and as really loud as it's been, I never thought we'd get to this point where I thought there was always going to be a certain level of trust, even if it wasn't to the level we've had over the past decade plus, and there was a little fall off. I didn't expect it to be this, where it seems like, back in the day, obviously, you could go and Tucker could be out there from 40, 50, 60, and you could go get your groceries, come back. The Ravens would have 3 points. You didn't even have to question it. You didn't even have to watch. You knew it was going to go in. But now it just feels like when he kicks it, you're leaning with every kick to see if it's going to go in or not. He's hooking a lot of these balls to the left, and you could even see on his last kick against the Eagles that he missed, he tried to overcorrect and it sailed on him wide right. He's in his head right now. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. He still has the leg power, and apparently everything is going in practice, going in during pregame. But I just feel like there's this extra layer of pressure, and Justin Tucker has been this all-time clutch kicker. You need him in a big moment, need him to make a game-winning field goal, 50 plus with a minute left. He's been good for that for so long, and I do think part of it is, I mean, just with Tucker being on the Ravens, everybody who watches this team, covers this team, has been a part of the team, has been so spoiled with kicker play over the last decade where, it's new. It's a new feeling. Even Billy Cundiff, who again is the reputation of Baltimore after he missed the kick in the AFC Championship game, obviously is now just down the drain. But he was really good for them for a while, and then they had Matt Stover obviously early. So it's like they've had consistent kicker play for so long, and this team has. And being a fan and watching, covering, to see an all-time great do this is, if you had told me before the season this is where we'd be, I would have said you're joking. There's no way this is even possible.
Yeah, it's interesting, because for a few years, Graham Gano has been a really good kicker for the Giants, and then last year Gano got hurt, and Thomas McGahee, who was the special teams coordinator at the time, he must have known that Gano was battling an injury because even before Gano went on IR, he said, we're so lucky to have this kicker who's been so good for us for the last few years. He said, because you really don't want to be on that kicker train because you just don't know where it's going to take you. And, because once it starts, it's hard to get off.
Yeah.
Let me ask you quickly, what is going on with this Deontay Johnson situation? What the heck is that all about?
I wish I could tell you in major detail, but based off what we've heard, that he refused to go in the game against the Eagles. He's been unhappy with his role since being traded to the Ravens, and again refused multiple requests to enter the game well, I guess now two Sundays ago, 2 weeks ago, and the Ravens now have made it public by suspending him for a game, conduct detrimental to the team. And it's not a good look for anybody. Deontay Johnson's in a contract year. He's probably looking for one or two more paydays before his career ends. And what does this say about you? You had
Mhm.
drama in Pittsburgh. Apparently, Carolina wanted to move off because there was drama there, and now here in Baltimore, this. I mean, if you're a young team, like say you're the Giants and you draft a rookie quarterback next season, and you want a veteran for your locker room, to help mentor Malik Neighbors and you know be a solid veteran presence. I mean, do you want a guy who's been at 3 stops and each one of those stops has had drama and locker room turmoil and effort issues and questions? I mean, that's something where teams probably look at that. Teams definitely look at that when they're trying to see if they should bring somebody in. So, not a good look for Johnson. Obviously, for the Ravens, they've also had more drama than usual, I would say, this season. It's been different than what this organization has been used to. Marcus Williams, their $70 million man, has been benched multiple times this season, and clearly is not happy with the way his season is going with his role. And this is probably going to be his last go around with the team. Eddie Jackson, who they signed to be a solid veteran presence, he got unhappy with his role and he was just playing terribly anyway. So the Ravens just said, all right, we don't need this. You're getting cut. And now for Deontay, I think they're going to keep him around because if he gets cut, well, he could latch on to a contender that they're going to maybe play in the playoffs, like a Kansas City or a Buffalo, or maybe he surprises everybody and goes back to Pittsburgh. Who knows? But I think Baltimore at this point has to hold on to him. But do you reward him in this situation. I mean, the Ravens traded for him because they needed a depth wide receiver. And I think that on the field, Zay Flowers, Deontay Johnson, Rashad Bateman's a pretty good trio. But do you look at him refusing to go in the game and do you say, okay, Deontay, you're suspended for a game, but after here's 50% of the snap share. Congratulations. You've earned it when clearly he's done nothing to earn it. They've played guys like Tylan Wallace over him, Nelson Aguilar over him. And I think there have been some issues with the way Baltimore's utilized him. I don't think it's been perfect from their end, but obviously when you refuse to go in a game, that just opens up a whole different can of worms. You're letting your team down, you're letting everybody around you down, and it all of a sudden becomes a much bigger issue than just you're unhappy with your role.
All right, Kevin, last thing for you. You mentioned earlier in the show that the Ravens lost this season to the Raiders. I can remember the last time the Ravens played at MetLife Stadium, played the Giants. I think the Giants won that game, a game they shouldn't have won. And I distinctly remember Lamar, I think on a bad snap, picking it up and running like crazy and sort of throwing the ball kind of sidearm, underhand, some sort of crazy pass he never should have thrown that got picked off in the fourth quarter, and the Ravens lose that game. And all of that preamble is to ask you this. Is there any path for the Giants to win this game on Sunday? The Giants have lost 8 straight games. They haven't won a game at MetLife Stadium this year. Their injury report is like 33% of the roster. It's insane.
I think that there are paths for the Giants to win. I think obviously the one would be just to dirty the game up as much as possible, make it an ugly, sloppy game, and don't let the Ravens get going. And part of it, obviously, if the Ravens lose to the Giants, I'm sure that part of it would be Baltimore not being able to get out of their own way, whether it's penalties, whether it's self-inflicted mistakes, turnovers, whatever that definition is. But I think that for the most part, it'd be the way that people are looking at this game in Baltimore, at least, is that if the Ravens don't win this game, I know that all the sports books has this as just an absolute Ravens blowout, like no questions asked. I feel like if the Ravens don't win this game by at least 14 points, if not more, it'd be considered like if you squeak out a win against, as you mentioned, a team that has so many injuries. You're starting another. Well, it's an old new quarterback at this point in Tommy DeVito. The offensive talent is severely lacking besides Tyrone Tracy and Malik Neighbors. Defensively, you don't have guys like Dexter Lawrence and a bunch of other stars. If you squeak out a win or if you lose this game, that's pretty disastrous for Baltimore. So you got to get up for the game. There are professional football players on both sides here for the Ravens and the Giants. You cannot overlook any team, whether they have 2 wins, 6 wins, 8 wins, or undefeated. So Baltimore, I mean, they're my pick to win this game. But I do think that there are paths the Giants can pull it out if the Ravens make their own mistakes and if the Giants play very disciplined football overall.
All right. Well, one of those things might happen, but I'm not so sure that the second one is going to happen the way that things are going for the Giants. Anyway, Kevin, I appreciate the time. I have to tell you that before I let you go, I'm very jealous of the hair. I used to have hair, but so I mean, I'm very jealous of the hair, but because there used to be real hair up here.
Yeah,
So, but I'm very jealous. So there is.
I'm hoping I don't lose it. I'm hoping I can hold on for as long as I can. I'm not sure if the day will ever come or if it won't. So I'm kind of going through the days with, I guess, blind bliss to see if I'm gonna get there or not. But right now
Enjoy
we're
it.
holding on strong. Hope
There you
at
go.
least we're doing that now.
There you go. Enjoy it. Kevin, I appreciate the time. Just before I let you go, if you want to let folks know where they can find you on social media, if they don't know, go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me over on social media at Chaos Striker 34, and obviously the show account for Locked On Ravens is at Locked On Ravens, and obviously that's a 5-day a week plus more daily Ravens podcast. I'll be going live after the Ravens and Giants game, so if you're looking for a Ravens perspective after the game, hey, maybe the Giants pull the upset, and I'm on there ranting my head off about how they did it again. they are who we thought they were, and do a whole Dennis Green thing. Maybe I'll do that. Or if the Ravens win, I'll obviously be on there celebrating from a Ravens perspective. So you can find me over there as well as all the other places I got work going on.
All right. Thanks for the time, Kevin. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.